Hey everybody, it's Mark Ruggiero here, Clark Commando 1983, and well, this is going to be my first video of a series detailing a replay. We'll see how far I get for The Guns of August by Avalon Hill from 1981. This was released, and I remember when we first got the game. Me and my friends had a lot of fun with it, believe it or not. World War I, and for all the panning it takes, we still had a blast. So I'm super excited to do this. I'm hoping that anybody that watches can enjoy it, and I'm gonna have some fun doing it. So this first video, and I'm gonna warn you, I'm gonna be doing the ride-alongs with this. We'll see how long it takes, but what I want to do is I'm going to go through, this is the 4th edition. Let me adjust my camera here, see if I can zoom in a little bit. It's a little too much, isn't it? Well, shoot. That's not much, but that's about as good as I can do it, I guess. Let's see if I can do a little more. Maybe like that, huh? Try that. Let's see. Let's adjust this a little more. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through the rule book in this video. And then after that, I'll be working on my setup, not on video, but I'll start video 2 will pick up when I kick the game off. You can get this set of rules on Board Game Geek, and obviously I sent it to my local office supply store and had it spiral bound, which I'm a big believer in. So let's get started, because I don't want to waste your time or mine. It's October 6th, 2023, about 2 in the morning. And what we're going to do is I'm going to try to pick up the highlights of the game and tell you what optional rules I come across them that I'm going to do. So, it has a basic, I'm not going to show you every section, but it has a basic introduction to the game. I'm going to be doing the campaign scenario. Yep. And which is going to start in August 1914. There's month and turns. And of course, you have the combat units. And if you're a war gamer, pretty basic. You have combat units with attack, defense, and movement. Combat support, which is your artillery, your siege artillery. Fort construction, railroad engineers, tanks for the Brits, air units for the French. There's a detailed breakdown if you need it. And so pretty basic. And you got your markers. I am going to be using the front markers with the sidebars, which I'll show you later at the end of the video. I'll take a quick look at the map, go over that really quick. But basically these, so there'll be, counters will be off to the side and the markers will be on the board. I believe that's what I'm going to go with. We'll see, but I think I am. You got your entrenchment markers, demoralization markers, isolation, train markers, beachhead, railheads. We are going to be using a lot of optional rules. You got your year marker, and I believe there's monthly markers. We talk about how to prepare for play, sequence of play. So Richard Beeman design, which is one of my favorite designers. And I recently just did a game for Compass Games on the War in the Pacific. So the sequence of play is real basic. You do a war declaration phase. Then you determine supply, which I'll go over the supply rules when we get there. Movement phase, there are some interesting things with the movement phase that I found by rereading these rules. You do a combat phase. Then demoralization removal phase, and I'll note it here and when I get to the rule, that you remove demoralization markers, but not units that currently suffered it in the current turn. So you'll need to mark that. Then you do an isolation phase for your units that are cut off. That's a different concept than supply. And then you do the allied player turn. And let's see, which is a repeat of the German. Then we do the interplayer turn, which there'll be a naval phase. I'm going to be using the optional naval units, so that'll be a little different than what's presented. You do a morale phase, which starts in 1916 to see if your guys collapse. You get your reinforcements, which I will be doing the optional production rules that are in here. In the 4th edition rules, because they're the most accessible. There's a really cool system in Battle Plan magazine, but I'm not going to be doing that because it's not quite as readily available for people. So, but that has technology and some other kind of neat concepts. So you may want to pick yourself up a copy of that magazine, and I will, at the end of the video, show you which issue that is, in case you missed it. Then we talk about belligerents, neutrals, and declarations of war, which discusses what you want to do with the neutrals. It suggests that you, let's see here, and we will be using the variable entry, so they're not going to enter on their historical things. Basically, some real basics. A neutral country cannot move or attack while it's neutral. It's suggested that you set it up after war is declared. I believe there's a couple of exceptions under variable entry. But for the most part, right here it says, let's see, make sure we get it on camera here in blue. What's nice about these, you want, if you do them in color, highlighted in blue is the notes, which says recommend that neutral units not be deployed until a player declares war. When this occurs, the opposing player immediately deploys the neutral country's units. Neutral country is conquered by occupying all of its cities on the map. And I want to note you do have to garrison cities as you take them. Before conquest and after conquest, but before conquest is especially important because if you don't garrison the cities, they generate replacement points as if the other side actually controls the hex. So it talks about hex control here, which is your pretty typical, if you move through the hex, you control it. If they're behind your enemy front, then those hexes are considered to be most recently occupied by the opposing side. So that way you don't have to march through every hex if you get a big pocket going or something. Let's see here. I'm trying to make sure I adjust this so you can see it and hopefully not totally bored out of your skull. So one thing that's interesting about zones of control, that's the next rule, 9.0 in this game, I thought was a couple things that I didn't quite remember from many, many years ago. So zones of control, of course, are typical. The 6 units around, hexes around the combat unit. The zones of control in no cases, none whatsoever, are negated by friendly units being in the hex. So that applies to supply, isolation, retreats. Also, zones of controls are not locking. So what they are is you enter them and you're actually allowed to move from Zoc to Zoc for 2 extra movement points. Now the movement points, if you remember and you went back and looked at the units, aren't super high. So, but that was interesting. And especially the part, in my mind, about friendly units don't negate zones of control. So that'll be something to keep in mind as we play through this. Let's see here. And it just talks about entrained units, combat support units, so that's your artillery and engineers and whatnot. And air units, of course, do not exert a zone of control. So let's see, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, see, during a combat phase, a unit may never retreat into an enemy-controlled hex, even if occupied by a friendly unit. And so let me tell you, that means if your guys get surrounded and get forced to retreat, they're going to die. So your stacking limits for the game are, the stacks can get kind of high. That's why I'm going to use the sidebars here, I think. Are 3 combat units. Let's see, 3 combat units, a regular artillery unit, a siege artillery unit, a tank unit, and an air unit could all end up being in 1 hex. So that can be quite high. During combat, units may retreat through hexes in violation of the stacking limit. And at the end of the combat phase, however, the stacking limit is enforced and excess units are immediately eliminated. I believe in the retreat rules, and we'll look through that when we get there. You can actually retreat an extra hex if need be, but I'm not sure. And then it just talks about the sidebars where you're going to use the lettered markers on the map and put the stacks in these side boxes. And I will show you that at the end of the video when we look at the map. So then we talk about supply and isolation. Isolation is separate concept from supply, but basically you can die from being isolated. But basically, to trace and not be isolated, you can trace unlimited length from your unit back to a city. Oh my goodness, sorry about that. And let's see. The phasing player must determine the supply state of all isolated units. Blah, blah, blah. What determines, I forgot. I thought it was unlimited. During the game, a unit must be supplied to use its full movement allowance. Oh, supply and isolation. Okay. If you're isolated, combat strength and movement allowance are halved, rounded up. An isolated unit is eliminated when it reaches its max isolation level. You do check isolation at different times, I believe, in supply, which I want to cover for you guys here, but I did only read this twice. So, all right, well, I guess we'll have to get back to that in a minute because I don't want to. But basically, if you are not in the city, you're eliminated if you're at the end, if you're an isolated level 1. If you're in a city, it's level 2, and level 3 if you're in a city in your home country. So, and isolation, though, is determined, I believe, at a little different time than supply because, as far as you're basically, it happens, I believe, at the end of the turn, you're allowed to check twice, beginning and end of the turn. So you could theoretically be isolated and then get back in supply after combat, or lose your isolation. Supply line trace pretty easy. You go, it's normally 5 hexes from the unit to a city, or a rail line that leads to a city, and that would put you in supply. Can be any city controlled by the phasing player in a friendly or conquered country, or any rail hex. So it's normally from the unit to the rail road, and you have to convert rails because we are playing the advanced game. And we'll go over that when we get to the rule. It's pretty easy. or directly to the city in question. And in winter, in the mud or snow turns in the weather, it's 4 hexes. So it does get cut down some. And a city continues to serve as a supply source unless all adjacent hexes to that city are in an enemy zone of control or enemy controlled. There is a limited sea supply, which I'm going to kind of skip here for the Germans. I believe it's 1 unit. For the Allies, it's 3 or 6, but it's also modified by the naval supplemental rules that I'm going to use that I have to actually read. We're actually going to be using the optional naval with the naval counters that normally you have to have made, but you can also readily get them. I found a place on eBay to get a set. So that's what I did. I bought paid the extra money, bought the set of naval counters because I have no real ability to construct. So movement is very basic. So you have regular movement, which is what you would think, and I need to go grab the charts, don't I? Because I want to show you that. But it's very common sense. Most hexes cost 1. When I show you the map, there are some rough hexes, there's mountains, there's marsh. You walk over here around the table, grab the charts, because I'm going to need those to show you. Anyways, but there's no real big secrets here. Pretty straightforward. So that's regular movement. There is rail movement, which I'll go over, which is pretty easy. Costs 1 movement point to entrain a unit. Cost 1 movement point to detrain. You can never you can combine regular movement with rail movement. You're also allowed to, you can't entrain or detrain adjacent to enemy units. Let's look at the charts here. Morale, naval interception, variable entry. Where is the terrain effects? Oh boy. All right. Well, dang it. I thought it was on the chart. Maybe it's in the rule book. And there is a set of charts in the back of this rule book, which I'll walk through, but here's the rule book, and this works. It came with the game. Talks about you got your clear terrain, your coastal hex, movement cost, effects on combat, which are all die roll modifiers. So you got your rough hexes, your swamp hexes, river hexes, lake hexes, rail, but anyway, city. Objective cities are in red. Those are important for victory. And then your fortresses. And then there's some notes there at the bottom. So, and that works. There is a set of charts, which I'll show you in the back of this when we get to it. For rail movement, though, you're limited to, let's see, they can move 24 hexes normally. And I believe weather, impacts it, knocks it down to 12. But basically every country by front, let's see, rail capacity for each player on the Eastern Front is 12 points. Each corps size unit or United States division requires 1 rail capacity point to entrain. Any other, so your corps and United States divisions, anybody else requires half a point. I already covered that. So rail capacity is given as a number. The rail capacity for each player on the Western Front is 18 points, and on the Eastern Front is 12 points. If you start on one front, and the fronts are basically the 2 map sections in the West, or the West Front, and the other 2 in the East count against the East Front. If you go from one front to the other, it counts against both fronts' capacity. So there's no real chart for that, so you're going to want to cover that. Sea movement, been replaced by the optional rule, which I've already said I'm going to use, but I still need to read the rules on it. So what I'll be doing with that piece of the rules is I'll discuss that as I use it in the game. Let's see here. Combat. Combat is never mandatory. It's always voluntary. Oh, there's a little note here for your siege artillery, which I believe the Allies have some heavy siege artillery in the campaign game. The French get a 322, which will enter the replacement pool, but I'm using the production rule, so I don't think that applies, but that enters. If you use the standard rules in 1916, the French get one. The German siege artillery, the 311, has to start off on a rail hex on the game. It's also cannot move in mud or snow outside using regular movement, which that's noted here also. Yeah. Siege artillery also somewhere is noted in the rules. So, for example, in the combat, which we're going to talk about here in a second, which is pretty straightforward, for every 6 artillery points, you get a +1 to the die roll, or is it -1? Let me look, whichever way favors the attacker. So yes, pluses favor the attacker and minuses. So not to confuse, but if you have our 6 factors of artillery and attack, you get a +1. Siege artillery, what it just talks about under the siege artillery rules, if you're attacking a fortress and you have both of the German, they have 2 siege artillery in it, and they're both involved in an attack on the fort, that would actually give you a +3. You would get 1 for each siege gun against the fortress, and then equaling 6 would give you another +1. So just want to note that so I don't forget it. Combat, basically, like I said, is not mandatory. When you do attack, you can attack any unit that you're adjacent to. The only requirements are A, all defending units have to be adjacent to all attacking units. B, you have to attack every unit in a defender's hex. The attacker doesn't have to use every unit in their attacking hexes. You can hold some back. You can, obviously, you can't split factors of one unit between different attacks. I say obviously because if you're an experienced wargamer, you would know that. But one thing, basically you can do what's called soak-offs. I'm not going to get into that, but yeah, if you're attacking a hex, you have to attack the whole hex. Entrenchments, you get the modifier for entrenchments. If all defending units are under an entrenchment in the hex, you can start entrenching in October of 1914, and you can do 1 level per turn. I'm kind of skipping around here a little bit just because it's in my head. Oh my goodness. Attacker can do their attacks in any order they want. If your odds are, let's look at the CRT. It's a pretty basic CRT. Okay. What it's talking about here, so it has 1-1 through 6-1. And if, say, the odds are 1-2, you subtract 1 from the die roll, 1-3, you subtract 2, etc. 7-1 and anything above the, was it 6-1, you add 1 to the die roll. So, I don't know, good luck. It's been a long time, but I don't think you get that many attacks that are super high odds. Combat support units we talk about. Basically, when you're attacked, you have to make a choice. You can leave the support units by themselves, or you have to actually say, no, they're attached to this corps. And they suffer the fate of the corps, so if the corps is eliminated, they're eliminated. If the corps has to retreat, like, for example, in a demoralization result, you have the choice of, kill off your highest strength unit or retreat a hex. So if you retreat the hex, artillery can't retreat. You would be able to retreat the core, but the artillery would still be eliminated. And it gives it examples in blue here. Combat support units can't attack on their own. They have to have a combat unit. This is where it talks about the 2 siege artillery, which I mentioned already. And it does talk about the terrain effects on combat, which are in a chart, which I already showed you. Let's see. So combat results, pretty basic. Attacker eliminated, so all attacking units are eliminated. Attacker attrition. The attacker loses attack strength at least equal to the printed defense strength of the defending units. Attacker demoralized. Attacker must retreat 1 hex or lose a unit with the largest attack strength. Excuse me, and units that do retreat are demoralized. Both demoralized. So that's a DD result, and it's basically a repeat of what I just said, except the defender also suffers it, and the defender has to choose before the attacker does. Defender demoralized is the exact opposite of attacker demoralized. You get defender exchange, so all defending units would be eliminated, and then the attacker has to eliminate strength points equal to, with attack to the defender's strength. And then, of course, you would have the very rare defender eliminated. So, any units that retreat are demoralized. When a hex is vacated due to retreat or elimination, any opposing combat units that participated and currently adjacent to the hex may immediately advance into the hex. This option, which is known advance after combat, must be exercised immediately before any other attack is resolved. Okay? I'm going to flip the page here. We're making some nice quick progress in the rules here. 27 minutes into the video, and if you're sticking with it so far, hopefully you'll enjoy better when I actually get into the action, but I did want to explain the rules. So it talks about the combat results table is on the player aid card, which I showed you. It comes with the game. And then we get into reinforcements and replacements, which the reinforcements, if you're not going to use the optional construction system, is, which I am going to be using, is right here on the player aid card. It tells you what you would get as reinforcements, which are separate right here. So September 1914 goes through each country what they get. These are new units, to be clear. The reinforcements are not from what you start with or the eliminated. That's for replacements. And reinforcements can basically be placed in any city hex that you currently control in the unit's home country. You can't place them where they'd be isolated or in violation of the stacking. You can place them in an adjacent hex if the hex is already stacked to the max. And if that's full, you have to, let's see, can you delay? I can't remember here. Reinforcements that cannot be legally deployed are automatically canceled, so you cannot delay them. But I don't never seen a case where you couldn't find somewhere in the home country to place them. So I don't think that's really an issue. Replacement points. Replacement points are the max is 20. This total is automatically decreased by 1, and I believe the replacements are going to be replaced by the production system also, but I'll have to double check that. But you can do breakdowns too in the game. Now in the standard rules, you can turn your, which I'll get to, you can turn your stronger units into multiple weaker units, limited 2 per turn. So for example, 2 5.7.4s can convert into 4 4.6.4s. You'd remove the 2 5.7.4s from the game and replace them with the weaker units. So max number of German replacement points is 20. It's automatically decreased, and this is the standard rule for each city that the enemy player controls. Maximum number of French is 10. That's decreased for each city that's under control. Maximum number of infantry for Italy is 5. Also reduced by each city under control. Russia receives 1 infantry replacement point for each Russian rail entry hex that is not controlled by the enemy player. In addition to its cities, the United States receives no replacement points until November 1918, which then you get 10 per turn. How about England? We can talk about Britain. Let's see. Talked about the French, the Italians. So each city, so there's several exceptions. So the British would get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, looks like 6 per turn, because they have 6 cities in England. 1, 2, 3, or am I misreading that? What is that? So the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, it looks like 5. So I wonder if it says on the player aid card. Let me look. And I'll note while I'm looking that when the blockade's in effect, maybe that's where it talks about it. Each year the blockade is in effect, the German replacement value drops by 1. And for Britain, when there's unrestricted submarine warfare for each year, their production dropped by 1. Well, I don't see it on here, but I know somewhere it talks about the British replacement points. Oh, here we go. British, let's see, the British. Where is it? British. Talks about the British. They start with some 6.8.4 infantry corps and 5.5.5 cavalry corps. When they're eliminated, because they were a professional army to start, they're replaced by 5.7.4s and then 4 or 5 cav units. And when the 5.7.4 is eliminated, it's replaced with a 4.6.4 and then a 4.4.5 cavalry is substituted. When that's eliminated, it becomes a 3.3.5. What did I do? And replacement points must be expended the day when they're received. Like I said, I believe this is all replaced by production anyway, so. But basically, when you do replacements, you spend infantry replacement points per the attack factor of the unit you're replacing. Artillery. You do the attack strength, except for the siege artillery, it costs 5 artillery replacement points. Engineer units are replaced at the cost of 3 artillery replacement points. And when you purchase them, you deploy them as reinforcements. And I'm just trying to see one last try. Replacements. I know it mentions the Brits somewhere, so just not quite sure where. Interesting. Okay, you can accumulate replacement points, but you can never accumulate more than 20 replacement points of either type. So that's important to note. We talked about expenditures, and then talks about the victory conditions, but we're going to skip that because that's for the basic game. And then we get in the advanced game rules, which is now that's where you get into your entrenchments, which we kind of talked about. You can start constructing entrenchments in October 1914. You can do 1 level per hex per turn. And during your movement phase, you construct an entrenchment by you expend 2 movement points. And you have to make sure you occupy it, and then you place the entrenchment marker. There is an optional rule where you just can entrench and pay, but I'm going to do the standard rule. If you're under an entrenchment, you can't participate in an attack. We're going to use, there is an optional rule where, so you don't have to be so fiddly with the counters. So I'm going to use that. Basically, you can attack. I don't know. I got to think about that one before as I'm clipping my counters. So you can build forts with a supplied fort engineer. You have to spend 3 entire movement phases in the hex and detrain status to be able to do that, to build the fort. And you also have to be at a level 3 entrenchment first. So not a fast process. It can take a while. All right. Talks about how forts are destroyed and captured. You can voluntarily, as a phasing player, destroy any fort if friendly combat unit occupies the hex at your start of your movement phase. When you enter a hex containing an enemy fort, the fort is automatically captured. And so you capture forts. If you're under a fort, you can't participate in an attack. And they subtract 2 from the die roll when attacked, I believe. Yes, decreased by 2. Then we get into Stostruppen. They can start to be created in July 1917. And you have to spend 7 artillery replacement points. And then their normal infantry. So pretty expensive. And you can do 2 per turn. And basically for each one, you increase your combat die roll by 1. And then tanks can start being done in November 1917. So we'll cover that rule if I get that far. The air units, only the Allied player has them in the game. There are only 2 air units in the game, 1 French and 1 British. You get them as reinforcements in July 1918, so it takes a while. Railroad repair. So basically your railroad engineers, you're going to track it with the railhead markers. They have to move through a hex to convert the rail that you captured. The rail hex in an enemy zone of control may not be repaired. It may not be used for friendly rail movement. So just keep that in mind because friendly units don't negate that. And then we already talked about garrisons. So you need to garrison those enemy cities up, or they will generate replacement points. After a place is conquered, you have to garrison each city in the conquered country that you own. If you don't, then you actually lose replacement points. It talks about Germany loses replacements for ungarrisoned cities in France, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Russia north of Brest-Litovsk. Austria for all other ungarrisoned cities. Allied power. Russia loses replacements for ungarrisoned cities in Romania, Bulgaria, Germany that would happen to take. In Austria, east of Budapest. France loses for all other ungarrisoned cities. Talks about an option if France surrenders. Britain and Italy may receive additional replacements for French cities not controlled by the Central Powers. That's an interesting note. Okay, so starting to get tired. It's 2 in the morning. Okay, naval phase. So it talks about unrestricted sub-warfare for the standard game. So beginning in so I'm going to be using the optional. So you can read the rules when you print them out. But basically, it gives you a little chart here about the blockade and its effects. When the blockade is instituted is January 1915 for the Allies, and it's a loss of replacement points. That's what that chart represents. So this is if Italy happens to join the Central Powers. So. Okay, naval operations, we'll skip that. Morale phase. You start rolling for morale, and you roll for it in February, then May, in August, and November. There's a little handy chart here, but you can end up with all kinds of nasty results. So here's the chart, and here's the modifiers. Historically, right, the French mutinied, Russia had a civil war, Germany ultimately ended up surrendering. So here's some, and then we have the weather rules, and they're pretty basic. So there is a weather table right here that you're gonna roll on. Right, each turn you roll, depending on the season, it gives you the month and the seasons, and then you have the die rolls. Note, I believe on the eastern front, maybe both fronts, on the March spring turn, if the prior turn was snow, then no matter what, it's at least mud. So, and I believe that's both fronts. Let's look at the rules here. It should be in here. So it has the weather phase. You roll. The first turn of the game, August 1914, is clear. If you play one of the later scenarios, you actually roll to see what the weather is to start. So clear weather has no effect on play. Mud weather. All your movement factors are reduced by 1. The non-rail portion of supply is 4 hexes. And snow, all movement allowance are halved, rounded up. Reduce the rail portion of supply to 4 hexes. Movement distance for rail is reduced to 16, so mud does not reduce the distance. You cannot repair railroads or construct forts in the winter term. Air units cannot participate in combat, and no amphibious invasions are allowed. And here's the spring thaw rule I was just talking about. During the month of March only, clear weather is treated as mud weather. All right, so we're almost done. Here's the optional rules we're going to use. I don't know if some of these will actually ever get used. For example, if you move enough units next to a unit and you're able to get 8-to-1 odds, you can declare an automatic victory. Flip that unit, enemy unit over, and it acts like it's not there, and then at the end of movement, it's eliminated. International combat coordination. The exception of Germany participating with the Central Powers, if you have more than one country in a attacking in the same attack on a hex, you decrease the roll by 1. If they're defending together, you add 1 to the other player's attack roll. Big push attacks. Basically, I'm going to introduce that rule. I want to try it. I always wanted to. And it will apply to the German clear weather turns in the beginning of the game. And then after that, it doesn't start again until 1916. Basically, when you roll to attack, you keep rolling until you get an attacker eliminated, attacker attrition, or attacker demoralized result. All right. And I believe and yeah, you can keep going. And then also we're going to use, so hopefully that big push made sense. Basically, you could do an attack, declare it a big push. Can't do it till 1916. Exception is the Germans can do it on the Western Front is clear. The Central Powers only can continue rolling. So basically, for each clear weather turn, and it's only on the Western Front. Captured artillery. So whenever an artillery unit is eliminated because the player chooses to retreat to comply with a demoralization result, the opposing player receives 1 artillery replacement point. So we're going to use that. That represents, capturing artillery. For ease of play, you can ignore the rules that prohibit units under fort or entrenchment markers from attacking. So that's what we're going to use that. Obviously, this is solitaire efforts. Won't be using the multiplayer rules. Won't really be using secret mobilization or fog of war, but there are some, where you can't inspect the other guy's stacks. You use the sidebars, which again, I'll show you the map here in a minute. We are using the variable entry rules because it adds more fun. So I'm looking forward to that. Let's see here. Britain automatically enters the war if the Germans do unrestricted submarine warfare or if Belgium is invaded. So, and we are going to invade Belgium. I know there's lots of alternate strategies, but I want to try these optionals and, see what happens, right? Because we're here to explore the game and have fun. Just talks about when you roll. Let's see. When do you roll for variable entry? During the reinforcement phase of February, May, August, and November game turns. And there's different modifications, which I'm not going to go through them all, but I have the variable entry table, and I'll show you the tables in the back. But there's also modifiers, which you can't see too well there. So we're going to use that. I like any variation we can get is wonderful. It talks about the Greeks, Turkey. Talks about all the different plays. So this scenario, we're playing the campaign game. replacement points. Let me see here. It talks about, this is under scenarios. Talks about deployment, which you can read if you're going to play. Now, let's see, it talks about this. Replacement points. Okay, so yeah, on the chart, like I said, I think the optional stuff I'm going to use is going to replace this, but talks about, like, here's your initial cores, here's replacement points. So this is Germany, it's by year, but for example, let's look at Britain. Yeah, they do. They get 5 in 1914, and 4 in 15, 5 in 16, so it looks like it's variable. But you got Russia, gets 12, Serbia, Italy, Romania, United States, Belgium. They don't get any. Greece. Okay. That's interesting. Belgium doesn't get any. I don't know if that's true, actually. But it does say, yeah, it does say 0. So that's interesting. I think that changes in the Compass remake. Artillery replacement points are received according to 14.21. So we'll go back, and just as a reminder, 14.21. Okay, come on. So for every 5 infantry replacement points, you get an artillery, and you round fractions up. So even if you received 1 replacement point, you would get 1 artillery point. So it's good to know. Okay. So let's keep going. Almost done here. So it talks about the minimum number of cores. Yeah, that's all in the chart. So for example, Germany has to put at least 36 cores on the Western Front and 12 cores on the Eastern Front. And what you start with is right here. Whoops. That's what these are by year. Then you get Germany, you get the countries, right? But this is what they start with. So, and then the max number, like I showed you where reinforcements are if you're using that. But we are going to be using the optional production rules, which we're coming up to here pretty quick, I think. Here's where it talks about the scenario you can't entrench before 1914. If you're playing a later scenario, they can begin entrench, blah, blah, blah. So, talks about that. I'm not going to go through all that. Belgian units have to deploy in Legion and Belgium. Germany can actually start troops in Luxembourg. So, and that's for 1914. The Germans also get a special movement phase. Immediately after Central Power combat, north of Metz receives special second movement phase. This is treated exactly like normal movement, except only those German combat units on the West Front may be moved. German units may not use rail movement during this special movement. During the first Garrus team only, optional, we are going to use this. Any unit that's not adjacent, when you get the special bonus movement, can actually move up and attack. And that applies to both combat and combat support units, but only to those that start not adjacent to enemy units at the end of the first combat. And then the French, of course, have to do their Plan 17. That's during the first game turn. Anybody that starts adjacent has to do an attack. The campaign game is when can, okay. Wait, I'm really starting to get tired here, aren't I? Oh, here you go. So the standard conversion I talked about, which would start in 1915, but we're going to be using the optional construction rules, be a little different. But for example, there's one here. So a 574 plus 3 replacement points, you can turn into 2 464s. That's how you get a little lower quality troops, but then you get more troops on the board that way. You may need them. So this talks about the optional naval rules, which I need to read before I start to play. I'm not going to go over it right now. Production, I think I will go over that. Where is that? Mobilization of armies in the Great War. So, mobilization of soldiers and the production of armaments took time in order to field the division, corps, and armies that were sent to the various fronts. Within this module, these soldiers are coerced on a regular basis, trained, or accommodated. This mobilization, so this does replace the reinforcement. Let's see. Oh, wait, do we replace? So you get supply points and personnel points. And you use these two types of points to field new units and create your replacements for old units. Except where modified, and this modified, the standard rules apply. And you can start conversion in 1914, which we just talked about. So during the reinforcement phase, each player would secretly write down what new units or conversions you'll produce for that turn. You're limited by your personnel points and production. So, for example, Germany receives 28 personnel points and 40 supply points. On August 14, the German player decides to build four 464s, which cost 16 personnel points and 24 supply points. 133 artillery, and converts some units. Comes to a total expenditure of 28 personnel points and 33 supply points. So this replaces reinforcements. Looks like not the replacement system. You can loan stuff to any other event. There's naval construction. So I'll look forward to that. I'll explain that more in my videos. So as promised, here's some charts. You got the naval setup charts. This is all available on Board Game Geek. More naval stuff, fleet order of appearance. Here's your resource availability by country for production, for your personnel points and your supplies, your unit production costs. So I'm kind of looking forward to that. I think it should be pretty exciting. You're also limited by the counter mix, I believe. So. Conversion table, naval construction, which, like I said, I need to read. And oh boy, we're at 1 hour for this video. So, Rather long video. If you stuck with me. Oh, here's the terrain effects chart we talked about. It's also in the back of the rule book. Abbreviated sequence of play. Combat results table. So this gives you all the charts. Weather table, breakdown, your victory conditions, your morale table. Let's see. Oh, yeah, there we go. Morale table, naval interception. And what is this? Oh, naval interception. Okay. Anyways, just some notes. So look forward to doing that. Variable entry table with all the modifiers. It gives you the reinforcement schedule if you're not using the production rules. And that's it. All right, so now we'll just do a quick, let's go back. Here we go. And we're going to come back. Do a quick just look at the map. I know it's on the flip side, but that's the map. These are the sidebars I was talking about that will be used. All right, well, I need to get punching and prepping the game. So it might be, we'll see when I get to the second video. I'm really looking forward to doing this. And, well, it's an hour-long video. It is what it is. And I'll be wanting to, I think I did a pretty comprehensive review of the rules. Oh, let me get up and reach across here. I did want to show you the Battle Plan magazine that you can get online. And I highly recommend it. And I'm not going to try it for this game because I'm going to go with what's more readily available. But this is the issue right here. This has technology in it. It has some really interesting more variants for the game. And this is issue number 5 of Battle Plan magazine. So let's get that in the picture. I love that Roger McGowan cover. All right, well, thanks for joining me, and look forward to this deep dive. We'll see how far I get into the campaign game, and this may take a while, or, you know, we'll see how long I get into it, you know. I'm going to at least do enough to make it interesting and cover all the rules. And then next up will be Anzio. All right, well, I'll see y'all on the flip side. Please comment, like. You know, a lot of you guys said you wanted to see this, so I'm doing a deep dive. So the more feedback I get, that's very encouraging. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you soon. Bye.